Kirby, the king of suck. This lovable ball of pink fluffy goodness is one of Nintendo's most recognizable characters and someone I've wanted to research for a very long time. How was he created? And how was he named? What are the development stories behind the game? And most importantly, what's happening in this Kirby lore that everyone is saying is so deep? I'm TheMentok, and this is my Origin Oracle series, where we'll do a deep dive on video game characters like Kirby and hopefully uncover a few things you didn't know about this franchise. So let's start from the beginning of the series. Grab a snack, kick back, and let's head back in time. Kirby's debut appearance was in the Game Boy classic Kirby's Dreamland, released to the world in 1992. And by the way, before I get into this, all of my Zelda fans out there, don't worry, I'm not abandoning you. Much like all these other franchises that I had to put aside for a little bit. I know my Sonic fans are seething at me saying this right now, but I will come back to Zelda and I will come back to Sonic. Liar! But I want to keep things fresh and I want to keep myself interested. And I think Zelda gets a little deep sometimes. So let's start with something a little bit more friendly, huh? Anyway, Kirby's Dreamland introduces us to the land of Dreamland, a peaceful realm where everyone lives in peace. You all know I love to get my lore directly from the instructions booklet, so let's dig a little deeper. On a tiny star somewhere far, far away from Earth, they don't call it Pop Star just yet, there's a very special place known as Dreamland. The Dreamlanders are very happy people who use their magical sparkling stars to play and work among the heavens. That is until one dark night, when the gluttonous King Dedede, DDD? Day. So in the West we pronounce it DDD, and in Japan it's actually Dedede, but I'll be saying DDD. I'll stick to the American version.
I'm extremely confused.
So let's move on. The gluttonous King DDD and his rotten bands of thieves swooped down from the neighboring Mount DDD for a midnight snack in Dreamland. Not only did they steal all their food, but they stole the Dreamlanders' treasured sparkling stars as well. And because the Dreamlanders didn't have the sparkling stars to gather food anymore, they began to get very hungry. Suddenly, a spry little boy named Kirby happened along and said,
"Don't worry, I'll get your food and your sparkling stars back."
That's my Kirby voice. With these words, Kirby set off on his quest toward the dreaded Mount DDD. We wish him luck. We wish him luck? It's like whoever wrote this wanted nothing to do with this situation. Anyway, the stage is set and Kirby goes off on his very first adventure to thwart this King DDD fellow and bring the food back to Dreamland. So that's more or less the plot, but what about the gameplay? Kirby's Dreamland is a 2D platforming adventure where the objective is to get Kirby to the end of each level. Just don't die along the way. Kirby has the ability to fly, exhale really hard to defeat enemies, and yes, he can suck.
Hottest thing I've been seeing all week!
This move is Kirby's primary weapon, allowing him to spit enemies back out as a star bullet to destroy obstacles or other enemies. Let's not forget that my guy can just swallow enemies whole so they can suffer a gruesome death, slowly being digested in his pink gastric fluids. Think hard about that for a second. These cute little enemies here are suffering. But with this being the first title in the series, you'll find a very crucial gameplay mechanic is missing. Kirby's copy ability. Yeah, his trademark move is absent, which makes this game very hard to go back to once you've experienced the rest of the series. But Kirby must travel to 5 different areas in Dreamland, reclaiming the sparkling stars from each of King DDD's henchmen, like Wispy Woods, Lololo and Lalala, Kabula, and Krako, all who would make frequent appearances in the series. In fact, a lot of the enemies from this game are still around to this day, like Cappies, the Poppy Brothers, and Scarfies. Yikes. Technically, Lololo and Lalala here are based on characters from another series known as Eggerland that predates Kirby by a few years. It's probably worth doing a video on all these enemy types down the line. Anyway, Kirby will end his journey at Mount DDD, where he'll face off with his new rival, King DDD, in a wrestling ring. And by the way, his theme always slaps. So after a hard-fought battle, DDD is defeated, and Kirby retrieves the stolen food for the Dreamlanders, and the day is saved. I gotta give them props for the ending execution though. Kirby inflates into this giant balloon and carries DDD's castle all across Dreamland, just dropping food everywhere. This is a guy that's just trying to get the logistics done as quickly as possible. We see the game end with Kirby saying goodbye to the player while the other Dreamlanders cheer him on. We only see their silhouettes here, but I assume these are all supposed to look like him. Which brings up another question, is there a race of Kirbys or is he unique? From what I found, this is kind of debatable still and maybe a better topic to cover in a future video when we start seeing more Kirby clones pop up. But there are a few masked characters within this series who seem to be whatever Kirby is, with Meta Knight being the best example of this. Regardless, it's interesting seeing the shot with all of these Kirby lookalikes. Kirby's Dreamland was a pretty significant title for Nintendo, and as of the recording of this video, the second most successful game in the series behind Kirby and the Forgotten Land for the Nintendo Switch. Behind this cute title is quite an interesting development story, so we'll have to rewind further back to the 1980s. We turn our focus to a tiny Japanese video game development company called HAL Laboratory. Founded in Tokyo in 1980 by a group of friends and computer enthusiasts, they're responsible for developing peripherals and games for personal computers at that time, like the MSX. And the company only had 5 employees, one of them being a single programmer working there part-time, a young engineering university student known as Satoru Iwata. Yeah, this was the man that would become the president of HAL Laboratory and most famously, the CEO of Nintendo.
My man!
By the way, Iwata is given a couple reasons as to why the company was called HAL, the first being named after HAL 9000, the rogue AI character and main antagonist from 2001: A Space Odyssey. The other reason Iwata would later claim in an interview, saying they were called HAL because each letter put us one step ahead of IBM. That's pretty damn clever. Once Iwata graduated and became a full-time programmer at HAL in 1983, he'd step up as the company's coordinator of software production, which allowed him to strengthen their relationship with Nintendo and set the company up to ship games for their new home gaming console, the Famicom, also known overseas as the Nintendo Entertainment System. He'd head to Kyoto to ask Nintendo directly to allow HAL to develop softwares for Famicom, to which Nintendo agreed. In 1989, a game designer named Masahiro Sakurai would join HAL at the young age of 19. Though he's more famous now for his dedicated work on the Smash Bros. Series, this would be his humble beginnings in game design. So this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed Sakurai would pitch a new concept for the Game Boy that anyone could enjoy. The title of the concept? Harukaze Popopo, translating to Spring Breeze Popopo, starring a character named Popopo, a cute main character who everyone will love.
This right here is my favorite thing, ever.
That would use their tongue to grab enemies. And while that description sounds a lot like Yoshi, this was still before Super Mario World. But the tongue mechanic would be swapped out with the idea for the character being able to inhale enemies and spit them back out. Another goal Sakurai pitched for the concept is to make the game accessible. For those of you that grew up around this time, I'm sure you remember the crushing difficulty of majority of games on the market, Lion King. So Sakurai went with something more chill, which led to Kirby's ability to hover and fly, allowing the player to spend less time worrying about dying in bottomless pits. Though he was also playing around with the idea of a mechanic for off-screen deaths, where if the player accumulated enough damage, it'd be easier for them to lose a life by being knocked off the screen completely by enemies. So while this mechanic didn't make it to the final game, Sakurai would completely forget about it and come up with the exact same idea for Super Smash Bros. He has a video talking about this on his YouTube channel, diving further into some of these development secrets if you want to check it out. Joining Sakurai to compose music for the Popopo game was Jun Ishikawa, who would be responsible for most Kirby soundtracks from this point on. Limited by the hardware of the Game Boy, Ishikawa had to get creative with his musical style, and placed focus on simple melodies, which, in my opinion, define Kirby's friendlier and more casual atmosphere. But this man would run with this style and drop some timeless bangers. So after working on this concept for over a year, HAL Laboratory was getting ready to release this title in late 1991. So viewers, I present to you Twinkle Popo. Yeah, this technically isn't Kirby, but Popopo, a smiling blob that was originally a placeholder sprite to showcase all the game's concepts. But the staff loved him so much that they tweaked him to be the final character. HAL Laboratory would start running advertisements for Twinkle Popo in late 1991, publishing this full piece in the Famitsu magazine and other publications with an attempt to introduce the world to their cute pink character. But despite their efforts, they would only receive 26,000 advance orders for Twinkle Popo. They'd have to go back to the drawing board, and the game was further delayed into 1992. To make matters worse, by that year they were on the verge of bankruptcy, mainly due to a huge economic collapse in Japan that occurred in the early 90s, and also from the high cost of one of their previous games, Metal Slater Glory, known at the time as one of the most expensive Famicom games to develop. So without many options, HAL would consult with Nintendo on what to do next. Enter Shigeru Miyamoto, who at this time was bringing in huge success to Nintendo with Mario and Zelda. His advice to the folks at HAL was that Nintendo could manage the publishing of Twinkle Popo after a much needed retooling. So they would agree to 3 things to improve this title. Restructure the game to increase the memory on the cartridge, use that extra space to add a more challenging extra mode, change the name of the title, and the main character. So with the help of Nintendo, the game got a boosted marketing campaign, and the Nintendo of America team would provide some suggestions for a brand new name for the character. We wanted American kids to enjoy this game too, you see. We asked Nintendo of America for their suggestions. Kirby was one of the many that they sent us, and it caught my eye when I first saw it. I remember Gasper was another one. There were lots. Miyamoto has also confirmed several times that Kirby was favored as a choice, since it was also the name of an important lawyer at Nintendo of America, John Kirby. Kirby won Nintendo a major lawsuit with Universal over the rights to the name Donkey Kong back in 1983, which I cover in some detail in my classic Donkey Kong video, so be sure to check that one out too if you haven't. But the other reason they chose this name was the sound of the name Kirby. The other element to the naming is that the character is very cute. Kirby is this soft and fluffy character, and he's very cute. In Japan, for cute characters, they use very soft names with soft sounds in them. I thought the name Kirby had these harsh sounds to it, and I thought the juxtaposition of this cute character with this harsh sounding name was very funny. So with that, Popopo was now Kirby, which led to the new Japanese name for the title, Hoshi no Kabi, or Kirby of the Stars, debuting in Japan in April 1992. Later that year, it would see its international release as Kirby's Dreamland. The game would be a major success, topping the Game Boy sales charts both in Japan and the United States, moving over 1.3 million copies within a year. As for Satoru Iwata, he would be appointed as the new president of HAL Laboratory, a condition suggested by Nintendo who would help pull HAL out of their financial troubles. Iwata has said in an interview that he turned to everyone at HAL and said, "Okay, from here on out, every game we create is gonna sell 1 million copies," which was the first step in boosting morale and changing the mindset of the developers. But there is a lot of work to be done to improve their situation. Of course, they would continue to build on the success of Kirby's Dreamland and the Kirby character himself, with Sakurai continuing to lead the efforts. So how could they improve this formula?
星のカービィがファミコンソフトになった。すっごくカラフル。ますますやんちゃ。星のカービィ、夢の泉の物語。
Kirby's Adventure, the groundbreaking follow-up to Kirby's Dreamland developed for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1993, alternatively known as Kirby of the Stars, the Story of the Fountain of Dreams in Japan. This was the game that truly established the Kirby playstyle we're used to this day. Masahiro Sakurai would return to direct, with Satoru Iwata, Shigeru Miyamoto, and Takao Shimizu serving as the game's producers. The most obvious new addition to this game is Kirby's famous copy ability. Kirby can now inhale certain enemies that, when swallowed, give Kirby their abilities for him to use himself. This gives Kirby 24 unique abilities at his disposal, making this title an insane improvement over the first. All of his abilities to hover, inhale, and breathe hard on enemies to brutally murder them make a return in this game, but Kirby's overall mobility has also improved, with him now having the ability to dash and slide. But not only that, Kirby is now officially pink in-game. As for the story, Kirby has an even more sinister threat to face this time around. The manual has 4 full pages of story here, so you know shit's going down in Dreamland. Light years away from Earth on a tiny star, we return to Dreamland, a peaceful place once again filled with cute little inhabitants that just eat, sleep, and play. There's an interesting little nugget of world building here. The manual says that Dreamlanders have naps after lunch, and when they awaken, they discuss their dreams with one another and hope that each other's fondest wishes come true. Definitely give some context to the name Dreamland. You guys definitely need to read some of these old manuals because it took me 32 years to find out what the actual Legend of Zelda was. Alex, plug that video, you remember the one. Anyway, our hero Kirby awakens from one of his naps, shocked that he didn't have any dreams at all. And after checking with other Dreamlanders, he finds out it wasn't just him. All the dreams have stopped. This can only mean one thing. Something must have happened to the Dream Spring. The Dream Spring, or the Fountain of Dreams, is a magical well that serves as a reservoir for all the dreams in Dreamland. These dreams flow out of the spring and grant all the sleeping beings enjoyable dreams. I'm actually getting flashbacks to Doki Doki Panic. This sounds exactly like the dream machine that Ward hijacks to give the citizens of the dream world nightmares. Forget the Mario series, Ward should make a return in the Kirby series, it would be perfect. So anyway, the manual tells us that the Dream Spring is given energy by the Star Rod, a magical scepter that has a fragment of an actual star embedded in its tip. So with all of the people of Dreamland now lacking dreams, it's obvious that the spring has been tampered with. So Kirby heads there to investigate, only to find King DDD bathing in its waters.
So you're up to your old tricks again? Hey, DDD?
Kirby racially profiles DDD, who tries to explain that he is trying to do everyone a favor by breaking apart the Star Rod and giving the pieces to his friends. Officer Kirby doesn't let him finish and runs off to go arrest all of his friends. And by arrest, I mean kill. And so begins Kirby's adventure, and this time there are 7 major worlds, each with 1 major boss and 7 stages within them. Enemies from Kirby's Dreamland return like Wispy Woods and Kracko. I feel weird saying that. But we have some new additions too, like Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright. But most importantly, we see the introduction of Meta Knight, a recurring enemy, rival, and friend in the Kirby series, as well as his band of misfits, the Meta Knights. In this game, Meta Knight is allied with King DDD, guarding a piece of the Star Rod, so Kirby must pick up a sword and take him on in an honorable battle of blades. I always think these fights are so badass. It's always a thrill to fight Meta Knight in these games. So with all of DDD's friends thwarted, Kirby goes to fight the big man himself, and after a little scrap, Kirby is once again victorious. So with the Star Rod finally restored, all that's left is to return it to the DDD. Stop. All that's left is to return it to the Get out of here. There we go, Kirby. You've returned peace to Dreamland. Oh my god, it's a plot twist. So DDD took the Star Rod to prevent the world from being shrouded in darkness from this sinister force named Nightmare, an entity that took root in the Dream Spring. So Kirby messed everything up, and almost in a petty way, DDD swallows him and launches him into the sky after Nightmare to go handle his fuck up. We've reached the final boss of the game, with Nightmare first taking the form of a dark orb. Equipped with the Star Rod, Kirby blasts this sucker out the sky, forcing him to transform into his true wizard form. And just as an aside, for the NES, Nightmare's animations are top notch. So with the help of the Star Rod, Kirby eliminates Nightmare, and the ending explains DDD's true intentions of helping the people out. Kirby waves goodbye to him and returns the rod to the Dream Spring, bringing back dreams to Dreamland. And so with the days saved, this closes out one of Kirby's greatest adventures. Can you believe Sakurai and his team made this game in a year? Yeah, even though Nintendo helped bail out HAL Laboratory and Iwata was busy whipping the company into shape, they still needed to earn some profits to pay off their debts. So leaning into a Kirby sequel seemed like their best bet. This game was developed for the NES, 2 years into the life cycle of the more powerful Super Nintendo, but they opted for the older console since the company didn't have time to set up the development environment for the Super Nintendo. But this time, Sakurai would make a greater effort to appeal to both new and more seasoned players, and came up with a copy ability to add more depth to his game. They came up with a total of 40 different concepts for copy abilities, but trimmed it down to the final 25, which is still a major undertaking in my opinion. Sakurai also has a video regarding the development of Kirby's adventure, and regarding this game he says, quote, "Development was stressful for a lot of reasons, and it really did a number on my stomach. But I think the end product holds its own against the many other titles in the NES library." Now I won't go too deep into it in this video, but Kirby's Adventure got an amazing remake for the Game Boy Advance in 2002, called Nightmare in Dreamland in the West. I will never forget the jingle they came up with for this commercial. So this game was overhauled with brand new graphics, redone music, and a new gameplay engine. And I know the purists in the comments section are going to jump on me for this one, but this remake is much better than the original in every single way. I mean, look at the glow up on Nightmare. The original Kirby's Adventure was warmly received by reviewers who all agreed that the brand new mechanics made it a worthy sequel. And while it wasn't as successful in sales as Kirby's Dreamland, Kirby would be sticking around for years to come. So what was next for HAL Laboratory and Kirby? They had all this debt to pay off, so they needed another banger. Kirby's Pinball. I know that may have come off as a joke, but this is a damn good pinball game. There's not much to say about this plot-wise, but it holds some significance in the series as the first Kirby spin-off game. Releasing to the world in winter 1993 for the Game Boy, the player would simply play pinball on 3 different boards based on the environments from Kirby's Dreamland. You'd use the flippers to knock a ball version of Kirby around, but what made this so cool was that each board had 3 floors to navigate. It's like one of those clubs with a different DJ on each level, but for this game, the objective was to get Kirby into VIP on the top of each board. The game consists of Wispy Woods Lands, Kracko Land, and Poppy Brothers Land, but what's even cooler is that at the top of each board, you have to fight a boss from Kirby's Dreamland. I always loved games that did this. It always made pinball feel more rewarding and just more like a video game. So the bosses are obviously Wispy Woods, Kracko, and the Poppy Brothers, but once you've cleared all 3 boards, Kirby will go toe-to-toe with King DDD in the original fighting arena. Once defeated, Kirby closes in to finish off his nemesis once and for all, before getting completely Goomba stomped by one of his henchmen. Everybody runs off screen and the game ends, coaxing the player to start all over again. You're probably asking yourself why Hal decided on pinball. Or maybe not, it doesn't take much to just roll Kirby up into a ball and throw him into a pinball game. Hal developed 3 other pinball titles in the past. Pinball for the NES, Rollerball, and Revenge of the Gator. Your guess is as good as mine for that last one. But they took what they learned from these titles and used Kirby as the backdrop. And if this game looks familiar to you, but you can't quite put your finger on it, HAL Laboratory would be responsible for Pokemon Pinball for the Game Boy Color, which was heavily influenced by Kirby's Pinball Land. And to close out this segment of Kirby's history, Iwata did successfully turn HAL Laboratory around, leading the company to fully pay off their 1.5 billion yen debt to Nintendo by 1999. Alex, adjust that amount for inflation, now converted to US dollars. $11 million paid off in approximately 6 years. It's no wonder Iwata was sent a warm invitation to join Nintendo, and eventually would serve as one of its most memorable CEOs. Much like Donkey Kong and Mario, I look at Kirby as another character developed from the mind of a visionary who, despite the stresses of financial downfalls and potential failure, wanted to put a smile on the faces of people that played his game. This passion, work ethic, and attention to detail is apparent in all of Sakurai's work, and ultimately made this cute pink puff a force to be reckoned with. So next time I'll dive further into the Super Nintendo era of Kirby, the time frame when the series got even more colorful. And I don't know, is this the part where the lore gets deeper? Based on how everybody has described this series, I'm waiting for that shoe to drop. So I'm just a clueless bystander right now until I actually do the research. You won't want to miss it. But as always, until then, be safe. The Prophet
Spoken.